week's episode is about the online undergraduate experience. Going to university is a wonderful opportunity to not only learn about a diverse array of subjects, but also make friends and build social networks. However, there are several universities in Canada that operate solely online, such as Athabasca University. Online universities are a great resource for students who are in remote areas or mature students with busy lives. But it can be hard to cultivate the same interpersonal relationships as being on campus studying. We thought it would be a good topic to discuss, as many students have been and are continuing to study online during COVID. This week's guest is Devon Mair, a business student at Athabasca University and social media marketing assistant at FAO, who is passionate about marketing and art. Devon previously studied criminology and teaching and found the perfect place where she can apply her passion for helping others. She's a people person, community-minded, and an amazing social connector. Welcome to our podcast, Breathe In, Write Out, Devon.
Thank you for having me.
It's exciting.
It is.
The person who edits the podcast is on the podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be a ride, definitely seeing myself. And, it's nice to have that control and cut out all those little weird pieces. So I'm excited.
So you've been with us now for, I think, a little less than a month as social media marketing assistant. This is kind of like putting you on the spot. Your boss is like, how's your experience been so far? Let's record this and put it on a live podcast.
Yeah. If I said any other answer, then it's been amazing, phenomenal, but it has, that's the truth. It's been such a cool experience. My first job ever was working with a small business with my family. So then to see it from another person's or like an outsider's perspective and coming into this new business and watching how you speak about your business and learning about all these things about how it came to be and the things that you find to be of value and the things that you leave your students with or your clients at the end of the day. I find it very personally fulfilling to watch people speak about their passions in that way.
Cool. Good to hear. Yeah, I mean, shout out to Devon. Anyone else, once he graduates, she's doing a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Not only is she very intuitive about marketing and kind of understanding what your business is about, excited about it, but also very artistic. So, I feel very lucky.
Thank you. Thanks.
And a fellow Albertan.
Oh, yes. That's the cool part about working here. So for all of you who are listening who wouldn't know this, I'm actually Calgary based and FAO is obviously Toronto based. So we're on a little bit of a time difference, but Lisa and I are both Albertans. So it's been nice to connect on that.
Yeah. So is there anything, as the marketing person,
yes,
is there anything you think our audience should be aware about FAO?
So I was thinking about this not too long ago, and while editing the podcast, it actually came to me. I don't think people know how truly stacked FAO is with creative, intelligent, amazing people. The two podcasts that I just finished editing, one was a professor that works at FAO and another is a master's student. And everyone has such an incredible background. And when you think about the services that are offered, you're in very, very good hands. Additionally to that, we were talking a lot about the why of FAO. Why does it exist? And when Lisa was talking about how she came to start this business, she was saying a lot about when it comes down to it, Lisa understands the university college experience. She knows the absolute hellscape that university can be for some people, especially when you're in your first years figuring everything out for the first time. And, you know, in an auditorium of 3,000 people, it can be hard to really get that guidance and this is the guidance, the little bit of nurturing that you need in those beginning times of everything.
Yeah, I never leave. I
Yeah, yeah.
Yesterday I was downtown and I was walking from someone's place back to the subway, and I could have easily, so people are familiar with Toronto, I could have easily walked up Yonge and gone to Wellesley Station. But I'm like, you know what? I want to walk over to the university line because it's closer to my home to go that way. But also mostly because I wanted to walk through the U of T campus.
Oh, have
And
that little bit
I don't
of
know, it just
nostalgia.
gives me this like feeling of university campuses give me this feeling of nostalgia.
Hmm.
And not only that, like I get excited because I'm like, wow, there's so many bright people here doing cool things that will later change the way we see the world. So I just get
Yeah.
this energy. So I love learning and education, but I don't like the way the necessarily it's delivered in these big mass institutions.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
you're
it's so
absolutely
weird
right.
that way, right? Because you have such like this motivated, inspiring group of young people, and even like very motivated, mature people who go back to school. And then you have it in the weirdest environment where no one gets to really talk to each other. Or
Yeah,
they do, but like it's networking. So it's kind of, it is a strange way to do something.
yeah, yeah. Who was I talking to about? Someone was, I know. I was talking to a postdoc in philosophy the other day, and I was talking about big universities and how large the classes are. And when I was in university, like when you get in fourth year, you have these seminar classes, and I think there was like 6 or 8 people in a
Hmm.
class, and then you can really talk about things. But the bigger and and you know the universities are like this because they're trying to serve a lot of students, but even those seminar classes are 25 people, and the lecture
Yeah.
classes, as you said, can be thousands. And so there is that piece missing of mentorship. Because I remember I'm very shy. People don't really think this is true, but I was very, very shy. And I think if I hadn't been in those small classes, I wouldn't have gone to talk to the professor. Like
Oh, totally.
I was not one to go to office hours. Um, but I would talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes after class about what we discussed
Hmm.
in the seminar. Because of the small group already, you feel like you're building that intimate relationship. So yeah, I think that's a really important piece of education. And as you said, I mean, we have people that work for us that have been professors, but again, they also just are not so into that model of education. They want
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. No, that's what I noticed too. Obviously, like I didn't go to the university because I like walked in there one time. I took a gap year. So
Okay.
then during my gap year, I was a total nerd about literally everything. So I would go with my friends to their lectures and just sit in.
Oh wow.
And because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think like you fall into that, or a lot of students fall into that. You graduate high school and they're like, okay, choose something. And you're like,
Yeah.
what do I do? So I fell into that trap of like, well, you either become a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a firefighter, or a cop. So then I went, I'm gonna be
Firefighter
a
or cop?
cop. Yes.
Did you take one of those like career tests and they give you a list of like 6 possibilities? Like how did
Yes. So the top one was teacher, the second one was cop, and then the third one was an esthetician. And I was
really?
like, that is the weirdest combination of things you could have somebody take a career test for. But I was like, okay, so I like marched on over to community college. I went to Bow Valley and I joined their justice studies program. So it's a condensed 2-year diploma of criminology in which you learn the entire criminal code back to front You can recite it pretty much on spot. So it's a pretty great program. But same kind of thing. Like I had basically a cohort of, I think it started at 50 and then ended at like 30.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were pretty much in everything together. So you have your friends that you make pretty much
Like high
first
school.
day of college. Yeah, exactly. Like my first friend that I made was the girl that I sat next to in our intro to communications class. And I was just like,
Oh, wow.
hi, can I sit here? And she's like, yeah, sure, of course. And then we had to do some like role playing as you do, or in like icebreakers. And then we're like, do you want to just like stay together for the rest of the day? And then we just like did that as two awkward 19-year-olds who don't know what they're doing. And yeah, so we all graduated together. And I would say that was like my favorite part of it, is that we had this like family of people who were with us the entire time. And a lot of our profs, or they call it instructors, because
Right.
some of them didn't have like a PhD, but a master's degree and like
Uh-huh.
career experience. So a lot of them taught multiple different classes. So we had them the entire time through, and they
Wow.
got to see us all the way through too.
Yeah, I think that's really special. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna plug myself again, but I think one thing, because I was talking to someone again the other day, and they're like, "What do you do? Are you a professor? Are you a teacher? Like, what do you do? Why are you always talking about these students?" You know,
Yeah.
and I talk about them like almost like they're like family, um, because just like what you said, what's interesting is my students will stay with us for 3-4 years,
Yeah.
go off and do something, come back, get some more support. So I really think that like sense of community you're talking about in education is so important. And I think for some reason, when especially in university, people go do liberal arts degrees, because that's really what
Hmm.
we specialize a lot in here, is support for liberal arts students. There's this kind of idea you should just like sit alone in a library and read, you
Yeah.
know? But there's so much learning that comes from exchanging ideas with
Oh my God.
your
Yeah.
classmates.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to before this, interviewing Jemima, who's another one of our coaches, and she specializes in sociology. And we were talking about theories in sociology. And theories are basically different perspectives to answering the same question. And if you can build those relationships in school with your professors, your colleagues, your TAs, you're essentially going to get different perspectives on the same issue by being able to have
Hmm.
those discussions, which then can expand your own critical thinking skills. So that's just so important. And I love how you talked about how you're together in that cohort. So how do you think being in that cohort influenced your own understanding or experience of that program, as opposed to if you just kind of went off on your own and like studied in the library?
So I think that this also kind of goes toward like, how does being with this cohort in a community college differ against, I basically do study by myself in a library now with online school. So
Yeah,
like, what is the comparing and
yeah,
contrasting
great.
there? So I think it's kind of hard to put into words, because you do have that connection piece, which I think is so, so, so important. Like when anyone says it takes a village, like I think that also applies to education in a lot of ways. Um, but I do think that the special part of going off on your own is that you completely form your own opinions of things. Like we
Mhm.
are not like a vacuum. We always have other people's opinions and experiences like shaping us. But when you do have that section to just be like a vacuum, I guess, where you're all by yourself and you are working on this, in my case, degree, you form all of your opinions based on the same material that everyone else sees, but you're completely to yourself when you're forming these opinions and these critical thinking skills. And when you're analyzing something, it's all your own thoughts, which I think is something that's unique as well.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess you have in your previous degree the experience of community and all kinds of different ideas and perspectives. And then this the online education with, I think it's Athabasca University.
Yep.
Is really kind of like a type of self-reflection.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to put it, is it's a self-reflection. Because like I said, all of those questions that you get, it's like, well, what is my experience with this? What is the material, the research that I'm doing? And how do I give this back? But also with business writing, it is quite different than what I'm used to, coming from like that criminology background. It's not very much about your opinion, which I think also helps when you're doing something that is very much on your own. You're analyzing a case a lot of the time, and then you're simply just extracting the information that a CEO would care to see. They don't care about your opinion. They don't care about what you think is going to be best. They just think, okay, what is the relevant information? Where is this going to get shareholder profit? And what do I do to get there? And that's like a little bit where your creative opinion comes in, but it's a totally different type of writing rather than like, here is a topic, here is your argument, here are your opinions and your references that back that up. So
interesting. I mean, I think that kind of brings up a topic I people often think in this digital age, like, why do I need to know how to write? Why is writing an important form of communication? And you have just shown that, listen, I have these different educational backgrounds, and in one, I was required to communicate in writing in this way. And now I can take some of those skills. You can probably take some of the skills from criminology and apply it to business, like a little bit. But now you need to learn how to communicate to another audience in writing. And so I think that there's also this misconception that, oh yeah, like English majors write a lot, but I'm taking a business degree. I don't need to know how to write.
That's a big thing. A lot of business students go in and they're like, I never have to write a paper. Lies, all of it. You're going to have to do so much writing. It's not reading a book and writing about it, but it's instead reading an Ivy case study, and it's 12 to 23 pages long, and then you have to extract the relevant information. So you're reading and writing just like every other discipline has to.
Yeah. And so I think people just being mindful of that these are skills that, if you are struggling with, are worth investing in, no matter which profession you're in. Every profession, whether it's an email or a business report or an Instagram post, you have to be able to use the written word. And it's not about so much about grammar and spelling and punctuation, which people often focus on. It's really, how do I take these words, like this puzzle? I like to use words as a puzzle. And how do I put them together in a way that this group of people can understand?
Yeah, well, drilling that down, it's like, know your audience. So like, who are you writing for, and like, what format does that take? Because that, I think, is the single-handedly most important skill, especially even working in marketing too, right? Like my language changes so much based on like, what's the organizational voice? Who am I talking to? Like all of this goes down into like, okay, what's my audience? How do I talk to them? How are they going to respond to it?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of going off on a tangent, but this brought up a question to me, because marketing is, you're area of expertise. And we're doing digital marketing, right? Because
Mhm.
we're on social media. And I've talked to other people in digital marketing, and they're really like all into videos and like images and whatever. And I had said to someone I know, I said, maybe you'd be interested in our poetry class. And he says, well, what does poetry have to do with marketing?
A
And
lot.
I was like, well, poetry is actually about, and I love poetry. I've discovered it's my new fun way of expression.
Yeah,
It's about taking words and turning them into images.
exactly. Yeah.
And if you look at brands, really
Mhm.
successful, well-known brands, like we were talking about this the other day, Apple, think differently.
Yeah.
Boom. 2 words. Those 2 words bring up all kinds of feelings, images.
Mhm.
And what is that? That's in a way, it could be a line in a poem. Because
Yeah.
the thing about poetry, there's the rules of prose and punctuation, they don't apply. So
Mhm.
words are concepts. And that's really what a slogan is. So I'm just like hammering in that what I believe to be a good writer, a good communicator, you can't just be professional. You can't just be academic. You can't just be
Yeah.
creative. You need to put these all together. And that's really what I'm trying to encourage. That's people are like, why do you have a poetry class?
No,
Like,
you're
are
so
you
right.
guest writing? Like,
But you know what's interesting is in one of my consumer behavior classes, we actually talked a lot about um, like word sounds when you're branding something. So they're saying when you say jelly belly, it like leaves your mouth
right?
on a smile. So then you feel
Oh,
good. So like, even when you talk about, okay, how does a word sound when I say it? How does that transition into a brand? Like Jelly Belly, it sounds so cute. You're like, oh, that leaves me with a happy feeling. It leaves me with a smile on my face when I have to say it. So
right. And that's
that's
actually
so much
also
poetry.
exactly. It's got a
Yeah.
rhyme in it. Jelly
Yeah.
belly.
Yeah.
It's easy to say.
Mhm.
So there we go. So here we go. Plug for poetry.
Yeah,
Listen,
100%.
if you're a business marketing student, consider taking a poetry course. It might.
Honestly, like with your writing and just like you were saying, thinking about how images can translate into words, that's branding in a nutshell, right? So there's so much that has to do with each other and is related. It's so important. I also like poetry. Um, I don't know if you're a big fan of Bo Burnham, like the comedian. He has like a poetry book called Egghead, and a
Okay.
lot of it is just like funny little quips about things. But even in his comedy specials, he has a lot of songs that he sings in them,
Okay.
and they're all like rhymey and um, I think it is because he is a poet that it like sticks in your head and it kind of becomes that earworm. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, why am I singing this weird song? And then you're like, oh my gosh, it was in the comedy special that I watched last night.
Yeah, and that's another point about how like songs and music are poetry.
Mhm.
I think a lot
Yeah.
of things we think don't involve writing. Like things we enjoy.
Yep.
Like you watch Netflix. What do you think? You think those actors just show up and
No,
improv the
exactly,
show?
right? Yeah.
No, there's a well thought out script. You listen to a song, you think that guy just like got on their guitar and then like pumped out a song?
Mhm.
No, even if people have watched that movie, how was it Rocket Man with Elton John? Like
Oh
Elton
yeah.
John is not a good lyricist, but he partnered with a person who is very good at lyrics. And the two of them together, either his lyricist would listen to his music and put words to it, or he would have words and Elton John would create music. And so all these kind of things and flow together. And I mean, maybe
Mhm.
you can we're kind of circling back a little bit to the original topic of Devon's eclectic education and skills. And I think this kind of leads me to the fact like you're an artist, but you're
Mhm.
also in business. But
Yeah.
you also studied a degree in criminology, which probably gave you some perspective on like society and people. Um,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
imagine. So do you want to talk a little bit about like how did this non-traditional path to education sort of inform who you are today?
Yeah. So like I said, going and pursuing criminology, I wanted to be a cop. Like I was fascinated by helping people. I wanted to learn the whys of like why people do certain things, like what circumstances led you there. And that's why I'm so interested in also listening to that sociology podcast that you mentioned, because that's a huge part of it. Like, what were your backgrounds? What are the forces that you can't control? What's your physiology? What's your psychology? So I pursued that and I got into an auxiliary cadet program with Calgary Police. And that was a really interesting experience. So basically, what you do is like, it's a precursor to applying to becoming a cop, but it's for like young people who are usually university aged. And you work at a district office. So you can't go out to calls, but people can come into you. So it was
Okay.
a lot of people who were like dealing with just reports. So like my car was in an accident and I needed to get like a sticker for my insurance, and you're like, okay. And then just other like little things. Sometimes it goes into um, like dealing with domestic violence. People come in and want to talk about that and get help. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me to just see like all the different walks of life, because like one second you have a professional who's just been an offender bender. The next you have somebody who's struggling with mental illness who thinks that somebody is tapping into your phone and like, well,
Right.
how do I deal with this? Like, what resources do I give you? So like fielding all these different people, you really come down to like, wow, this is like learning about how to be a people person. And at the end of the day, like it's what is your person psychology? Like, how do I feel this? How do I interact with you? Knowing your audience, right? All these different people
Right.
come to you for help, but you're all different people with completely different
Right.
experiences.
It's all about communication.
Yeah. So after that, I was like, okay, don't think I want to be a cop anymore. That's a little stressful for me. I'm an introvert. I don't think I can do this for 12 hours a day. So I went in and I got a job as an EA at a school.
Okay.
So I thought maybe I'll pursue education, as I said. So again, working with kids, all different walks of life, different audience. How do I communicate to you? Um, I don't know how to do sixth grade division. We're learning this together. Like,
We did it
um,
one time, maybe we forgot.
I don't think I knew how to do it then
Oh,
either. But we learned, and like having this aha moment with a sixth grader, we are like, carry it down. And then they're like, yeah. So again, like, how do I communicate this? You're a completely different audience than all the adults that I was just working with. And then I was working at a non-for-profit that worked in crime education.
okay.
So looking at crime prevention from that lens. And I used to design programs there and facilitate them. And then I got into marketing there. So I was like, well, would I be able to try to market one of the programs, something like that? I was just talking to the people there and they're like, yeah, sure, if you want, go for it. So I got a lot of mentorship in that realm. And I was like, wait, this is really interesting. And this kind of takes everything that I've been doing up until this point and makes it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been communicating to different audiences for so long, but they
Right.
didn't really fulfill like that creative drive that I have. So I was like, well, how do I marry art with the things that I'm doing? And I'm like, marketing. So we actually had a film done about us. They were going to do an advertisement on their digital pages for Tourism Calgary for free things to do in Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
So they came in and they were filming, and the marketing lead was like, hey, do you want to come and just like see what's going on? And I was like, of course I do. So I went down, and they were filming and they were talking about all the different content that they needed. So basically in between takes, I was pestering them with a billion different questions. I was like, how did you get here? What did you take? Where did you go to school? What is this called? Because, you know, a lot of people don't know that there's a billion different forms of marketing. I was a person who didn't know. Actually, I still think I'm a person that doesn't know truly all of the different professions that exist in this world. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many different things people can do. And I just didn't have it in my brain as like, oh, that's a job title, you know?
Right.
So he was talking to me about, well, there's this thing called content marketing, and then there is SEO, which is like search engine optimization. So that's working on analytics of how to have your business found on Google or something like that. And he's like, then there's social media, which can be content curation. I was like, this makes no sense to me, but I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually, which I did. So yeah, it's one of those things where it starts to all click because you're like, wow, all of these
Yeah.
people that I've been talking to for all of these years, throughout my brief adult life at this point before I came to it, it makes sense that it's so much about communication, knowing your audience. How do people like to be talked to, and how are you going to make them feel comfortable?
Yeah. I really love that in this story, we see that your path wasn't linear.
No, there's no line.
My
It
path
was a
was not
squiggle.
linear either. And I think that's a message that young adults need to get is we
Yeah.
ask people really young. Like I remember in grade 2 having this exercise, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said a doctor, the teacher corrected to nurse. That's a whole other commentary,
Yeah.
which I later wrote a university paper about. But
Good. Yes.
sticks with you, those moments in childhood.
Mhm.
But you know, what a strange expectation we put on like a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
What are you going to be when you grow up? And then this idea, I remember also at that age thinking university was 12 years. And then incidentally, I was in graduate school and other programs for
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
12 years. Because my concept was like, oh, school, you know, you go to grade 6 and then grade 6 goes
Yeah.
we're putting all these expectations on children, and then you grow up
Mhm.
and like you, it's like, okay, there's like these 6 options,
Yeah. And how are you
and
supposed to figure it out?
I need to fit in one of these 6 boxes,
Mhm.
and then you don't really fit in the box, and then this can make you have a crisis of confidence. You know, I'm not really fitting in this box.
Yeah.
How do I do? Okay, let me try another box. Wait a minute, this box doesn't quite fit either.
Yeah.
Okay, let me like try this other box. And then somehow on the process of trying out these different boxes, you looked outside the box and you're like, oh, these guys are filming a film. This looks kind of cool. Like, what is this? And then you started to ask them about it. And then you realize, wait a minute, I like this. And then you might feel like, what a waste of time. I went through these 3 other boxes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, because
Yeah.
each experience you gain experience. And I think really what you're doing, almost like marketing, you were clarifying who is Devon, what is Devon's skill.
Yeah.
And if you look at all of those, we see communication, empathy, because knowing how to change the communication. And then it's really just about, how do I find the space where I can apply this kind of like, and as you said, art, core things about who I am and what I learned. And then actually career is kind of like fluid.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so interesting. And that's a little bit about that time that like studying at Athabasca has given me, is that flexibility to not just be a student or not just be working at a certain job. It's like who actually am I outside of just a career box? Because I don't think that we really give young people enough time to figure that out. And I think that's a great time for university to figure that out, but it's also stressful because tuition is so high now. Like you go and everything has a price tag to figure yourself out. But I
Right.
think, like we were saying, the best thing about it is that when you're in university, online or in person, that's that time to, no time is ever going to be wasted by pursuing education. No
Mhm.
time is ever going to be wasted when you get job experience. It is all going into that all encompassing, who am I? What are my experiences? And then when you have that time to self reflect, what do I like about those experiences? What do I do with them? What am I good at? Because that's
Right.
another thing too, right? And then
Yeah.
finally, you find something, and it does happen for everyone. You do find
Yeah.
something, and then you're like, ah, there it is.
You just know.
Yeah.
So let's circle back to this education piece and learning online.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of people, I mean, now for the last year or two, everyone's learning online.
Yeah.
And when that happened, it was like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose all these aspects of education and how do
Yeah.
we deliver it. And, it was just overwhelming for everyone. And I think there was a perception that, especially you heard this about high school students, like,
Mhm.
oh, the grade 11s and 12s got cheated out of their education,
Yeah.
or university students. And I do feel for the international students because
Yeah.
they're paying to come to another country
Yeah,
and they don't.
totally.
Like, I mean, that's a whole other discussion,
Mhm.
but just this kind of idea of being cheated, but you actually, consciously chose an
Yes.
online university. So what are the benefits of that?
So the main benefits of doing online university is that time flexibility. I think that university is a very, very, very stressful thing for a lot of people. And when I went back to school after completing a diploma and going every day, my classes were they would start at 8 a.m., but I had to be at the train station by 6:45 a.m. to get to downtown on time. And I was just like, I can't do the commute anymore. And like the late classes, I tried that and I was like, this sucks. Like I'm wasting so much time on commuting every day.
Yeah.
And like I'm losing time. I need to be doing homework, but I get back so late. I still need to figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner. And like if you're living with your parents, that's great because they can help you out. But I think that the cool part about doing online university is that you have so much flexibility. And that's the scary part for a lot of people because they're like, oh,
Right.
if I have all the time in the world, I'll never do anything.
Right.
And so you really have to check in with yourself and be like, am I the kind of person that can set personal deadlines and stick to them?
Hmm.
And do I know what kind of learner I am? So for
Right.
me, I was a notorious class skipper. So I would not go to a lot of my classes and I would study with the textbook and come back for tests and be like, hi, it's nice to see you again for the third time this semester. Like, so I would do that, but I was totally happy with that because I found that some instructors, they would give so much life to their lessons. And those were the ones that I was like completely like zoned in, engaged the entire time. But for others, it's like here's exactly what's on the slide that I provide to you outside of classes, and I'm going to read to you. And then
Right.
you're like, oh, I didn't come for story time. I have stuff I need to be doing and the deadlines that you're setting, and you make me come for story time. So what's the point? So
I don't
I
even
was
know if it
okay.
was story time. It was more like reading off a slide time.
Yeah, exactly. Like just
It was just like,
driest.
here's the
Yeah.
live audio recording.
And that would have been better because then I would have saved half an hour on commute each way. So
Yeah. Like
yeah. So
a lot of students really, really enjoyed that during COVID. They really,
yeah.
really liked, they didn't have to go to class. It's winter. They don't have to go out. And also
Yeah.
they could watch,
Mhm.
like like some of it was live stream and some of it was pre-recorded. And especially for students who English is their second language,
Yeah.
having that recording was so helpful because they could go back and like listen to it again. They could look up a word and then go back. So there's definitely like a lot of advantages.
Yeah, you save so much time, and like having those tools at your disposal for review is so important. And I think that's such like a great resource for when you're studying, or for when you're just like trying to figure something out. I'm a person who quite literally has to work things out with a pencil. So when I have those resources and I can sit down and be like, okay, this is like the point that I need to memorize for my exam, but I don't know what this word means. So then I have to define the word and be like, okay, well, how does that fit into this equation? And then put all those different pieces together. Having that like pause and look back ability is amazing. So I think in that way, it's so beneficial. And especially like you said, for Canadian winters, if the train is broken or you can't get to school or whatever it is, because I've been snowed in before, like can't get the car out of the driveway, get stuck coming out of the garage, like you can make it to class. Like, and people say there's always a way to get to class. No, there's not. Are you a person who lives here? Like, where do you go? Do you teleport here? I don't get it. Like, you can't even come to class sometimes. You're a prof. Like, we're all just people.
Oh my
you know?
God, one time in high school, they have, and people who don't live in Alberta don't get it because it's so cold.
Yeah.
It gets to be 40, but they keep running the school, at least when I grew up, until it's 40 below. When it's 40 below, they stop the buses.
Yeah.
But when you talk about getting to school, the teachers still have to go to school. And one of my grade 7 English teacher rode a snowmobile to school.
That's amazing.
So that's how I guess when you're like, I mean, that's dedication, but how many of us have a snowmobile? I mean, I'm Albertan, so my parents have some snowmobiles, but I don't have one in Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't be allowed to really have one in Calgary. I mean, you couldn't really drive it down the street.
I think one of the things that we don't pay a lot of attention to that I think we should is, I've been reading the book Atomic Habits, and I think that this is something, one of the points that he makes is do something when it's easy, or else you're never going to do it. Like, make it the easiest you possibly can. So if you're a person like me who gets up and you're awake at 7 a.m., you're getting ready, and then you're sitting down and you're getting prepared. I basically prepare myself until 10 a.m. and then I'm ready to actually get work done. But it's like a bunch of these little pieces where I'm like, hey, wake up, you're still groggy, like check if anyone messaged you, get ready for the day, eat breakfast. And then you sit there, and I often have my books in front of me and I'm like, oh. I'm tired. I don't want to. But then it comes to like 10 a.m. and I'm like, okay, it's time. So do it when it's easy for you. If you're a parent and you have your kids and you're sending them off to school, and then you have the time where they're at school, that's going to be when it's easiest for you.
Right.
But for a lot of parents, they think that the only classes they can go to is evening classes.
Right.
But evening is a stressful time. How are you going to get kids to soccer? How are you going to feed your family if your spouse also works,
partner.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's making it easy for you and knowing your own habits and your own learning style. I did find that the mistake that I made my first year was I overworked and under accessed my resources. So I was working 40 hours a week when I first started because I was like, wow, I have all this time in a day. This is amazing. So I was doing that. And then I would go home and make dinner and then study. But I was so tired by the end of the day that I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's so stressful. So my grades did suffer. But one of the things that I think that you do have to keep in mind is you need to access your university resources. And I think that goes for everybody. I don't think a lot of people access their tutorial times. There office hours, like you were mentioning too. For Athabasca, it's a little bit different. So you don't have to go into somebody's office, but they'll book a phone call with you, or you can shoot
Yeah.
an email off to them. Like they respond within 20 minutes sometimes. And you're like, sweet, that was great.
Wow.
Thank you. But yeah, book a phone call, talk about your assignment. That was like the best advice I could give to anybody who's a student at Athabasca. Talk to your tutors and your instructors. And if you say, hi, can I phone you about this?
Right.
Then you can list all of the things that you have, and then they'll like really help you get to the points that you need to be.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
so
great.
interesting because I think there's so many points you said that I wanted to comment on.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll just comment on this one. But because I was gonna ask about community, you know, like one thing they really talked about during COVID was that lack of, and I think this is really tough for little kids,
Yeah.
the lack of sort of space in the classroom. Same thing for university students. And so I really love, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that piece. It sounds like there is this way of forming community, and in a way you're kind of having a more intimate experience with your instructor, even though it's online. It's very intentional. Like you
Yeah.
can't just wander into the building and see if the professor's there. You know, you can't just have a random chat after class, which are all like wonderful things, but this is a different model, and it also has value in that I can't even say the word.
Intentionality. But yeah, you're so right. Like you have to be somebody who seeks it out. So in that way, I would say that I think that's also where it falters though. Having a face and like knowing how a student acts when they're in front of you and how they interact with the students around them. Like I have reference letters and I still keep in touch with some of my professors from college, and they know what kind of person I am from that. When I'm phoning a professor and being like, hey, can you help me out? And even like the Students Union, they do like Zoom nights where they do trivia, stuff like that. So the latest one I went to was watching the debates live for the Canadian election. And it was really exciting to get to see other students because it really is like this weird mishmash of people. And then you're like, cool. Honestly, it's great though, because you see how all of these people are so driven to pursue education, even though they've been working for so long in their respective fields. And for some people, it's like they're going back to get their master's. For others, it's the first degree they've ever done. And it's really exciting. So you do have to be intentional about finding those connections.
I think you're making some good points here that kind of demystify online education. And that these things we worry about, even me, like I'm like, I don't want to put this business online, but actually I was able to connect with more people, and interestingly, I had met some of my students in person this year, and it totally didn't even clue into me that I'd never seen you in person, because we had such a rapport that it's like, of course I've seen you in person. And then it was like, whoa, no, this is so. So I think the point I'm trying to get is you definitely can get that connection through online education, but as you said, it's in different ways.
Yeah.
And like I had that experience. I went to the University of Alberta for my undergrad. I loved the University of Alberta, but I couldn't really go to alumni events. But during COVID, they had a lot of stuff online. I did a poetry thing for them for St. Pat. There is no way I could do a creative writing workshop in Toronto for the University of Alberta alumni. They're not going to fly me out there, but I could do it on Zoom. So I think that's really important for people to know, especially during COVID. There are ways to get these things, but you have to just be a little bit more intentional, or think differently than we're used to thinking about education. You know, I have a friend of mine, again, I'm going off on a tangent. But we've known each other since undergrad. We're pen pals for 20 years. We see each other. I mean, we don't talk on the phone. We don't do Zoom. We did once over the break with a couple of our other undergraduate friends. I think I see her like once every 5 years, 10 years. But we have this really close connection because of letter writing.
Mhm.
So I think, and Julia Child, famous is, if you read her biography or watch that movie Julie and Julia,
Mhm.
her best friend, they never met for years. They were just pen pals. So I think the point I'm trying to make, and it's sort of circling back to communication and writing, really,
Mhm.
is you can form these connections, you can get to know people in ways that are non-traditional across distances, across, you know, cultural background. There's all kinds of different ways to connect. And I think if you put the effort in, you're intentional and mindful about communication, you can connect with all
Mhm.
kinds of different people. And really you need to build those connections early to be able
Yeah.
to ask people for references.
Mhm.
Yeah. So um what so we've talked a lot about a lot of different, I'm like, wow, maybe I need to like change the title for this podcast.
Oh, we might. I don't know.
Like, let's talk about online education. We talked about like everything,
Yeah.
education, being a young adult, figuring out what you want to do with your life. Um, you talked a lot about kind of the pros and cons of online studying. For students now who are not at a university like Athabasca, which it's just designed for that, but
Mhm.
are still doing hybrid education or maybe online education, depending on where they
Mhm.
are, what advice or tips would you give them, since this is kind of what you've chosen to do?
Right. So I think that a lot of people are doing asynchronous studies. And with that, you still have deadlines, like hard deadlines that you need to meet, which I think gets rid of a lot of the hard part of what doing a flexible degree would bring to a lot of people. So that already checks that off, right? Like you need to meet a deadline no matter what, or else you're going to have percentages taken off, whatever. So I think the main advice that I would give to people is don't be scared to talk to your professors, access your resources. If you don't understand something, online learning,
Get extra coaching.
get extra coaching. Yes, like receive external help. If you need it, that's for sure. And you need to have that connection to, I think, understand big topics, or especially those who are in university for the first time. Um, you don't know how to format anything. You don't know how to do university yet. You need that extra help. So that's something that I think is super important. And then as for just going through your courses, as I said, maintain your deadlines is like the biggest thing, but create healthy study habits. So one thing that I've seen has been like really helpful for me and a lot of people that are learning online, because I follow a lot of YouTubers that do online studies as well, is being like very visual and cognizant of the time that you're spending studying. So one of the best tips that I got that I've started to use within the last month, where I'm like, oh, I should have done this the entire time. That would have saved me a lot of headache. Because like before I would power through, and this is one of the things that you can do, right? Like if you're in the mood to study, you're in the mood to study. Like I could sit down for 10 hours and like do a single course. So like there are times that I finished a class in a month, and there are times that it's taken
Wow.
me like 4 months to do the entire thing. And there are times that I finished something in the last month of my classes, right? So it just depends. But if you know what your deadline is going to be and you know how long something is going to take you, setting like your iPad or your phone or your computer and having a countdown clock. So setting 35 minutes, I find is like a perfect amount for me to actually be able to get something done. But also I'm like, okay, I got something done and it wasn't super stressful and I didn't get bored. So watching that timer tick down as you're working on something, and then you're like, okay, I've only got 5 more minutes left of this. I can do an extra question or whatever. And then don't do one thing all day. Do a little bit of everything every day. So if you have 4 classes that you're in, which I think is the best advice I could give to anyone, is like when you're in university, don't take a full course load. That is so stressful. You're not going to do well at like all of these things. Do really good at 4 things. Take a summer class. Like
Yeah.
you'll be fine. University degrees are supposed to take you 5 years, in my opinion. So take your time doing that. So switch from one class to another one, and then do your one after that, and work in those times where you do feel productive. If you can't work with other people because you're going to talk to them the entire time,
Yeah.
you can't work with other people.
That's
You
totally
will
what I
talk the entire time, right? So, and that's fine. Set that 35 minutes to go and meet up with a friend for coffee. If you can work with other people, like I have friends that I can't study with, I have friends that I can study with.
Yeah.
We'll do that same thing together. And I think, again, building that community for yourself, that's something that I've done this year. So I meet up with friends. I have a friend, she's not even in school anymore, but she is studying to work on a different line in a hospital. So she was studying for, it's like the cardiac floor. So she needed to do basically an entire class about cardiology. I guess that's what it's called. I didn't study it. You can ask me. But yeah, so we'd study together and we could do that. And we'd switch and be like, okay, good. And then we'd have like an hour that we set aside for eating and talking, and it'd be like, Kate, don't talk to me anymore. And then we'd be like, good. So
that's good motivation. I know
yeah,
sometimes do that on Zoom.
yeah,
Because it's kind of like if we were talking this week about procrastination. A lot of these tips are related to procrastination. Yeah, and having that like accountability partner.
yeah,
As
yeah,
long as you're both accountable, not one person is the chit chat partner and the other
yeah,
one's like looking for accountability.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So having that kind of social aspect, but also that accountability aspect, somebody who's going to be like, are you working or are you playing on your phone? And it's like, shut up, I'm playing on my phone. So yeah, someone who's going to help you out with those times as well. So
Yeah, it's like a gym buddy. Except for
yeah, exactly.
all good points. So like you're talking about kind of knowing your work style, your study style, breaking things into chunks, having variety, being aware of deadlines, using timers, because I think one thing procrastination is a lot of people don't get worried until it's the last minute. By putting that timer in place, you're kind of creating that stress.
Yeah.
To like kickstart you, and then having that accountability partner, whether it's online, in person, whatever. And you also said accessing the resources. And I think that's a big thing students kind of take for granted. I mean, you're paying this tuition partly for the course material, but you get access to all kinds of stuff you are not going to get access again.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you work in a really wonderful company, but where are you going to go? It was like, I get a gym, I get counseling, I get a health center. There's like hundreds of clubs. I mean, you just hang out at university and like, don't do this, but like not even go to class. I mean, you would be busy all day with all the different ways you could learn. So just like tapping into that is
and
huge.
your career centers.
Yeah, good point. Career center.
Like when you have a job, they're not going to have a career center for you to find a different job.
No. Maybe within the company, they might have like development programs.
Yeah.
But they're not going to help you leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. Having said all that, also, I know the one issue and the reason we exist is that they have so many students, they can't serve you to the depth and degree that you might need. So sometimes it is good to go look outside. So wow, what a great discussion. I've lost track of time again, which is what I said to Devon. Like sometimes I'm recording these things, I get into the topic, and yeah, one of my students was laughing at me the other day because I am The reason I can teach time management is because I'm not always the best at time management. And she was like, what? You stayed up this late? You did this? Yeah. Not doing. So anyway.
Say
whatever.
what or
Getting
do
off on a
as I
tangent.
say, not as I do.
Exactly. So anyway, last question.
Mhm.
You mentioned Atomic Habits. Are there any books that you would recommend or really touched your life?
So Atomic Habits is one of them for forming healthy habits and making work easier for you, which I think is especially important in the day and age of asynchronous education.
Okay.
Another one is Click. I read it over the summer.
What's that?
It's all about forming connections with people, and
Okay.
the title is talking about when you click with somebody.
Mm,
So that was a really, really interesting one, especially if you have to be a self-starter, or you're finding jobs in university, or if you're in marketing. Obviously, you want to get to know what clicks with people, right? So the whole book goes on these different ways that people form these deep relationships pretty much right off the bat. So they call it quick set intimacy. And I had never heard of intimacy being used in a way that was outside of like a romantic partner, right?
right.
But we have intimacy in so many different ways with so many different people. And when you put it in that lens, you feel so much more together with society and the people around you in general. So they're talking about business partners actually that met and they sat down and they talked for hours, like right upon meeting each other. And they're like, how do we get that? What is it about people? So they're talking about vulnerability. You know, you need to be a little bit vulnerable with people for them to be vulnerable with you. Like you're not just going to give up something, or you
Right.
will. And that's how you form that deeper connection right off the bat.
Right.
And they also had talked about proximity as being one of the main things that makes people click. So students that sit right next to each other on the first day of college
Oh yeah.
are
Like
actually
friends.
bound to be friends. So it's just interesting. They were saying like, even if you have assigned seating, the people who are in your closest proximity will be closer friends to you than the people on the other side of the room.
So interesting.
Right?
Cool thing.
Yeah. So talking about proximity, talking about vulnerability.
I think, well,
Yeah.
people can check it out.
Yeah.
But again, this all is kind of circling back to communication for me. Like your audience, what do you need to tell them? And just again, how important these soft skills are.
Honestly, yeah.
Intangible skills for, personal development, career success, academic success.
Yeah.
Whatever. You got to be like a whole well-rounded person. And it feels better. Feels better.
Yeah.
Living
And
that
I
way.
think a lot of people, they put on their resume, effective communicator.
Yeah. What is
and
that?
Then you meet them and you're like, are you though? Are you sure? So, it's one of those things where you need to work on that skill. And there's a lot of literature. There's a lot of practice. Me personally, obviously gravitating towards social media as my career path. I was chronically online and socially awkward. So, so I had to work on my social skills. Shocker.
Yeah. You
But those
seem
things
very
didn't come naturally.
charming now.
Yeah, but it took years of work. Thank you, though.
No, I mean, now I'm not so shy, but I was very, very shy. Like as a child, we go to the grocery store. I'm like 4 or 5. Anyone comes talk to me, I'm hiding behind my mom's leg.
Same.
My like big, chubby cheeks are like red, and I had to practice a lot.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is a skill.
It takes work. It really does. Some people are naturally charming, and I'm like, imagine. But yeah, for others, for some of us, it doesn't come naturally, so you have to work on it.
Yeah. Well, maybe they grew up in a family, who knows? They were trained from a young age.
Yeah.
So thanks for being on the podcast today, Devon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I think it's great for people to know everybody on the team that's helping out and kind of like what we're about as a community. So Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
totally.
Even though you're apparently socially awkward hiding on the internet, I think
Yeah.
I think you did pretty well.
Thank you.
So you can find, I mean, sure, she should be on the website, but you can find more about Devon on our website, www.found.ca. And of course, she's managing all the social media, so you might not see her face there, but she's there posting the posts, and you can definitely find out about her from that. So everyone else, stay tuned for a short meditation writing exercise.